Hello, LinkedIn. We are live here on again for another episode. Paula Wan's just come off a previous episode. It's really lovely to see you all. And this is the last one we're doing actually before everybody breaks up for the festive season. So thank you very much, Luann, for joining us. So today we have Luann Wise, and we've been meaning to do this for months, haven't we?
Yeah.
I think it's about 6 months. So it's great that we are finally here chatting about this topic, why social media is not just for Gen Z. So Luann, do you want to just give us a bit of an intro as to who you are for those folks that are joining us or listening on the podcast, who you are, what you do, a bit about your experience?
Yeah, I will do. And thank you. Thanks for having me. And I love that music intro. It's quite relaxing, wasn't it, for 30 seconds before we start talking. We've met a few years ago. I think we've talked for many years on and off via messaging and Zoom and screen as we have done. I'm a marketer, have been for over 20 years. Started my career working in ad agencies, went client side, and have now been running my own consultancy business for 11 years this year, and worked B2B mainly, some B2C as well. Right now, my consultancy is a really nice mix of working directly with clients to support them, and that includes manufacturers, law firms, higher ed, some consultancies as well. So quite a really nice mixture of client work. And then on top of that, kind of training, teaching with universities and business schools directly for LinkedIn. I'm one of their online learning instructors, have some courses in the library if you have a premium account, and a lead trainer for Facebook and Instagram. And the reason the Lighthouse is under my name here is because I developed a resource about 18 months ago where really I wanted to put all the news that I share in an email and, on my social media platforms, all the resources that I use, the apps, the training courses, etc., into kind of like a one-stop website. So I created the lighthouse.social, and you've spoken at one of our events, and keep this up to date with the world of social media that just doesn't stop changing. And when we spoke earlier in the year, we kind of started riffing on this topic, didn't we, about generations and what does that mean, and kind of got to the point of going, that would make a good live. Let's do that.
Let's have a chat. Yeah, and also a shout out for your summits that you do. I can't remember how do you do it. Is it every 6 months?
I'm doing 3 a year, so March, June, and September.
Yeah, so anybody who's watching, it's really worthwhile keeping an eye out. Follow Luann, connect with her, because these summits are brilliant. They're a good mix of different topics, different focuses, and they're all online and superb. So really nice, digestible content. So so shout out to that. So why social media is not just for Gen Z. I mean, I know we're going to get sucked down a hole here because there is so much conversation about generations on social media. How they use it, that kind of thing. So do you want to give us should we just define the different generations? And I don't like putting people in buckets because I know it's not like that, but so broadly speaking, what are the different generations? I've got it somewhere.
No, I've got it in front of me as well. And I think, we'll be honest, part of this conversation kind of started because, I'm happy to say I'm not Generation Z, I'm Generation X. Between my generation, there's then millennials and then Gen Z, which there's a few different date ranges, but the date range is really the one I work to is kind of 97 to 2012. So the 18-year-olds that would have started university in September were born in 2004. So to give us an idea of 2004, that is the year that Zuckerberg created Facebook in his dorm room at Harvard. And because it is in December, do they know its Christmas was Christmas number 1? So for those of us that are Gen Z and
full of facts, aren't you, Luann?
Full of facts, yeah, Christmas facts. So that's Gen Z. But I think really the reason that we started talking before, and I know you've got stacks of it there as I have.
Yeah.
Conversation seems to be so much around Gen Z because it is the generation that are entering the workforce now. The early years of working and graduating, and this may already be a digression. It's where social media role often ends up in an organization with the intern or with the, you know, the graduate or the, you know, the first role of, oh, we have a young person, a digital native, you can do the social media. So I think that is primarily why there is so much conversation around Gen Z and where it sits.
Yeah, but Gen Z are not the only ones that should be on social,
No.
actually. And this, for me, this is where the conversation starts. Now, if anybody's watching, and I know there's a bit of a delay, but if you've got anything to add to this, any research reports that you found useful, any questions you want to throw at us to discuss, or even discuss amongst yourself, please pop them in there. But this, for me, is what's quite interesting, I think, is that there's different generations will have different attitudes to social. Different generations may use social in a different way. I did see some research the other day that said Gen Z are jumping off. Gen Z, listen to me for my American audiences. Where did that Gen Z? Where did that come from? Gen Z are jumping off social, or they're in decline of social. And then I saw some other counter research which suggested that they weren't. They're just using it in a different way. So I know we're already going off all the questions here, but what's your thoughts about that? Because this is just a bit of a chit-chat conversation about it.
Yeah, I think stats will always say what we want them to say. And if we were doing this as a slide deck, we would have gone off and found the stats that supported our argument. But I think actually there's another definition question here. And, you know, how do we define social and social media, and what does that mean? Because, you know, if you were to search it, and Wikipedia will say there's over 200 platforms, and you can group them into networking, you can group them into imagery and geolocation and so many different types, that I think the term is so broad now that, and even if you look at, you know, some core reports that I'm sure, you know, we all look at, YouTube is on there and has always been on there. And personally, I don't always put that under social media. I think it's a video platform. You know, they will be talking about WhatsApp. Is that social media? Is it just a messaging platform? And then you've got all the, you know, more niche ones that are coming through, like Reddit and Discord and things. So I think the term is so broad that it's very easy for us to, when we talk about things, like really kind of pigeonhole this direction or this direction around how we see it ourselves. So it's about internet use, isn't it, at the end of the day, and mobile phone use and communication.
And I think that is the key point, actually, in the research running up until this. The Gen Z audience they have grown up without having any limitations to information, people, you know, they've just grown up in that environment where it is as is. Whereas millennials, Gen X, certainly baby boomers have never had that. They've seen life before it, or they've not necessarily grown up. But I'm quite interested. I did a little bit of research between Gen Z and millennials, actually, because even though demographically they're quite close in age, there's not an awful lot between the ages of them. But I noticed there are some things here about, you know, Gen Z is quite pragmatic, whereas millennials tend to be quite idealistic. But both generations really value corporate social responsibility and that kind of approach. Millennials saw what the pre-recession looked like, the boom before the fall, whereas actually Gen Z, they just watched their family struggle through a recession. They didn't see so much of that. So in that sense, they have a very financial approach to, you know, to how they looking at facts, and building trust is a big thing. So I just think it's quite interesting when you see the different demographics and their different attitudes, and why they use social in a different way. Their experiences are a little bit different to maybe a Gen X like you and me, who, you know, I grew up with computers just coming out, you know, and mobile phones just launching. So it's quite a different technology adoption, I guess.
It is. And actually, you know, I saw your post that you did a week or so ago about the mobile phone, and, you know, how your daughter has just got to the age of having a mobile phone, and your rules. And it was like, we didn't have that. I mean, I did have my first mobile at 18, got it taken off me quickly because of the phone bill that I ran up. That I remember coming home for Christmas from university, and my phone bill was pinned around my room. So that didn't last very long, and I don't think those rules would have helped. But I think it is about technology, isn't it, really, this kind of growth and this use, and what we should say as well, you know, to put everyone in age band into one pot is a whole nother conversation as well. But it is about the times that we were born and living in, and I think so the conversation is really about the technology that and information that is available.
Yeah, and what that has done to shape our attitudes towards technology. And I think this is why, maybe some generations are a little bit more resistant to it, or maybe a bit slower to adopt it. But the thing for me about, I guess I know we're focusing on Gen Z a little bit here, but Gen Z, what is up with me, man? I'm calling it everything, but
stick with it. It's fine. Everyone knows what we mean.
Yeah, I'll just keep going. The thing is about that, though, they're going to be soon coming into buyer roles. Now, we primarily work in B2B, and there is a really good report actually by Trust Radius, and it's last year. There's newer data this year, but it really talks about how Gen Z is now moving in. They're moving into the workplace. Yeah. Millennials are now making up for 60% of the tech purchase decision-making process. Now, at some point, Gen X and baby boomers are going to move out of those buying roles. And for me, B2B marketers need to understand that and how to talk to this new generation where they're at. And we need to have an appreciation for that. And also the workforce as it is today needs to recognise that. I mean, what's your feeling about, I've gone completely off the question. Sorry, Ryan. But yeah, what do you think?
I think that fits with the trend that we're seeing, trend and data and observations around how people are using social now. So if it's our early career people who are very often the people that are giving tasks to research, look for the options, they're the ones that kind of are given the first brief to go out and see what's out there, is that social media is being used more and more as a search tool. Yeah. As a place of discovery, and to the point where Google will now see a set of social media platforms as a competitor. Some research came out, and we're not going to talk about the kind of credibility around this, but TikTok is where a lot of Gen Z are getting news, information, discovering brands, working out what products to buy, things like that. So I think there's also this shift in, it is a channel, they've grown up with it, they are using it in perhaps a different way to our generation started using it in the workplace, in a work role, for networking and connecting. That is the shift as well around this generation, and their role within the organization and their familiarity with the tools for going, well, I'll just search TikTok, or I'll search this way to find what it is I need. They're not doing the traditional searching that perhaps would be our default.
Yeah. Do you know, I'm rapidly trying to find this quote. That's ridiculous, isn't it? But yeah, I did find something actually that someone from Google actually mentioned that Gen Z now are going to Instagram and TikTok for their searching. Yeah. They don't go to Google. No. This is not where they find information. This is not where they're being influenced, which for me, I think is quite interesting, because then how do you get, if they're the ones that are getting the research job within the organization, how do B2B organizations and marketers really make sure that they're being even considered as part of that research pool? Because if they're not on Google, if they're on Google and they're not searching on Google, that's a bit of a, yeah, that's quite interesting, isn't it?
It's a tougher question, and I think I mean, there's also that mix around. We could often differentiate between the two by saying the search intent is different on Google as it is on social, but perhaps it's the search intent is now changing. But is it about needing to understand who their influencers are, who they're following, and a lot more kind of coming out around collaborations? Because if they're not necessarily searching for something, Ryan's popped a link to the report in the chat, so thanks, Ryan. It's not necessarily about what they're searching, but how they're searching for it, and getting the influencers and the conversations on board, that who they're listening to and their sources of information. It's not about SEO and pay-per-click anymore and appearing in the search results. I think it's a lot more organic and authentic than that.
Yeah. Then actually, that reminds me, because I did see this 87% of Gen Z spend more time on social, but they're the least likely to follow a brand, which kind of
Mhm.
ties into they're using it as a search platform to educate and learn. 79% would purchase after an influencer recommendation. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, actually, and that influencer
Mhm.
within B2B, it always has really been in B2C, but certainly within B2B, it's going to get bigger and bigger. And this is quite interesting. Gen Z is the least likely audience to use analyst reports as for guiding their decision making process. And I think, that's quite a interesting. I mean, maybe they've
That's
just not. Yeah,
that's a shift, but perhaps that's then an internal conversation, because theoretically, if you were asking someone to go away and do research and they came back to you with going, oh, here's 3 options, you
yeah,
may say, where's the data, where's the white paper, where's the report, because of the way
yeah.
that
We'll
we've grown up
overlay.
in business. We'll probably need to, there's another layer of research, isn't there, to look for the evidence of
Yeah,
the buying decision at that point. So
yeah.
maybe buying decision groups are going to get bigger and longer, because there's almost this social is a whole nother level of the research that perhaps happened in the past.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I mean, we're already seeing buying cycles
Mm.
extending. I think
Yeah.
we're already seeing the buying groups expanding, the deal cycles
Mm-hmm.
extending. And social sellers were already onto that. They're
Yeah.
already looking at how do we do this. I saw a report from LinkedIn this morning, actually, about how the sales cycle is getting longer, and those that
Yeah.
are in the future, or certainly 2023, they need to focus on shortening that, or at
Mm-hmm.
least getting visibility of the buyer group much quicker. But you're
Yeah.
right, actually, if a lot of this research is being done um, externally, I think it's just a fascinating thing. So what about this? We often hear leaders talking about I'm too old for social.
Yeah.
So we're going from Gen Z right to the other, maybe the
Yeah.
other end. A lot of leaders are Gen X, baby boomers. They're in that demographic.
Mm. Yeah.
I hear this quite a
I was
lot
going to say,
still.
yeah.
Yeah.
I hear it, and I've got a couple of answers on this one. So, one of the reasons we had a conversation originally, I think, was because of a research project that I'm doing with Warwick Business School around social media and use in SMEs, and we're just rerunning the same survey at the moment, actually 2.5 years later. So I just had a snapshot look at the data this morning, because we have a question around I'm too old social media. Do you agree or disagree? And the percentage differences were 27% agreed and 60% disagreed. And then there's the kind of, so there is quite some clarity around feeling too old or no, that's fine. But I have a
Yeah.
really nice story from when I did a training course probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And, I really admire the people that were in the room, because there was a comms team that I was training on social media, LinkedIn specifically, and there was a generational groups in the room. And amazingly, the intern stood up and said, yes, I know how to use social media. I know what things to tap and how to technically use it, but no one has told me what I need to say on behalf of the organization. I've been given the logins and I need to say it. And, quite clearly, an older generation said, well, this is what we need to communicate to this audience and this audience and this audience. And I kind of went, between you, this is where the gap is. And actually, in terms of training, you'll probably know as well, it's easier to teach how to use the tech and how to
Yes.
post. Actually, I love the fact that the intern asked the right questions, and that's perhaps another question, asking those questions. But she'd been given the role, but no one had actually briefed her on what to do
Oh,
with this piece of technology. So that's where the gap is. And I think, Jen said, yes, they know the tools and they don't have the fear around using the tools, but they don't necessarily know the what or why to comms or what they need to do and the business context of it. Whereas really established comms people know that in their sleep almost, but have a fear of social media as a young person's thing and I can't do it and haven't done it. So actually, if we can just get those heads together, we would get everyone saying it's fine. And I think it's just that it's the technology gap that I think is the gap rather than social media.
Yeah, that is a very
Brilliant.
real practical example in the room, isn't it, of where
Yeah.
the gap is,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
So how do you close that gap then? Because I mean, training is a good
Yeah.
step, I think.
Yeah.
Because I do wonder actually if there are generations in the workforce. You very mentioned it very early on in this session, that they understand the tech and they understand how to operate it, but perhaps the context of the business environment, the corporate environment, the brand voice, employee voice, how do you facilitate that is missing. And then at the other end of the scale, you've got people who know that but can't operate the tech. How do you get that together then? What do you think?
I think there's a level of reassurance of you're not alone. You're not the only one. To both sides, it literally was sides of the room, and just reassurance, but also showing that you get it. Probably like you, Sarah. I joined LinkedIn 12, 13 years ago, and it's a habit. I don't have any fear around it now because it's just part of what I do and think about and the way I work, the same as perhaps when email was introduced. To a certain extent, I have that feeling around TikTok being a new platform, a different type of content, an entertainment platform versus B2B text and words, which are in my comfort zone. So actually, I think some of this fear is not just about the technology, but it's about how much new stuff is happening all the time, and that point of almost like overload of like, I just I can't keep up anymore. There's just so much new happening. When can I just do what I need to do and stop learning? And I'm not, you've got to be curious, you've got to be a learner, but I can kind of see this overwhelm. And also there's another element of it was seen perhaps just as a marketing thing.
Yeah.
But in the world that we're in, and we've also talked about this, is the whole employee advocacy, and where you get results on LinkedIn is personal profiles. So it's also a bit of, I think, social media and marketing becoming part of so many people's roles. That adds another layer. There's just layers and layers to this, isn't there?
Someone once said it, actually. I really wish I could remember who said it, but they said, social media was 100% of one person's role, but actually we're evolving that it needs to be 1% of everyone's role. That essentially is what advocacy is. And, this is about empowering employees to tell that story. Now, another bit of research I found was that that millennials and Generation Z are most trustworthy. They absolutely need it. They need to have trust in a business B2B relationship. And that will come from authenticity and people and employees. I just think advocacy is going to get stronger. But I do wonder if people have found, my experience, what I'm observing at the moment is, I think a few years ago, folks thought, well, we'll buy a tool and that will fix the advocacy problem. And I think we're very quickly realizing it's not. And we're looking at how organizations can scale advocacy, encourage more employees to have a voice on social, and almost tip it upside down. This is not the brand asking employees to amplify. It's actually employees and the brand amplifying them. For me, that is the bit that a lot of people have got wrong on advocacy. But we've got off topic. Gen Z.
Well,
I know,
isn't there a LinkedIn ads have just added that element that a brand can now amplify an employee's content?
Post.
So I think you're absolutely right. That's the direction that it's going in. But I think there's also a training issue, a conversation issue around, this isn't a quick thing. This isn't I'll talk to you for an hour, teach you which buttons to press, and then magic, it will all happen. It is long-term drip feeding, showing up, consistency, and that's where how we've business has been done, hasn't it? And probably like you, a lot of businesses around referrals and conversations, and social media isn't a magic bullet and a quick win. And do you get questions about, if I get active on LinkedIn, I'm going to get all these leads in my inbox? It's like, no, it doesn't happen like that. So maybe it's, maybe we should just do a myth busting session.
Yeah, we should. That's a really good point. And the real businesses that have got ahead were the ones that started this 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right. It takes a lot of time to do this, and I think the generational side adds complexity to all of this, because you've got different attitudes, different experiences, different platforms, different places that people are hanging out in different places. It just is layer upon layer upon layer. You've got to, it's not easy.
And I think another layer is that in the workplace, social media is also often based on personal experiences.
Yeah.
So it's, you'll have heard as well, Facebook is, and it's how people use it personally that they then are trying to adapt into the workplace. And perhaps as Gen X, we were earlier in that, using it for personal and professional at the same time, possibly even work before personal. I probably used LinkedIn before I used Facebook, and actually our Gen Z were using it so much personally before having to shift in the workplace. And perhaps that's part of the challenges, that shift into the workplace and how social media fits in.
Yeah, I'm going to add another layer of complexity as well. Geography, language, cultural differences, it's a minefield. It really is. So coming back to what you said about the, I'm too old for social and this different. One of the things I was going to suggest as well, and I've heard it done in a few organizations, is reverse mentoring. So you buddy people up from different parts of the organization with different technology habits as well. That's a potentially good way of getting around that as well, which I thought was quite good. So I've got another question. I am going to try and keep to them, Ryan. Don't worry. How would you describe social media usage for non-Gen Zs? How should brands respond?
So this is about that point of search, I think, is that it's about brand search and discovery, and around, it's about engaging with those influencers and creators as well as the end customer. So it is about generational differences. But actually, doesn't this come back to marketing fundamentals and saying, generation is only just part of your audience persona? It is just one channel. But really, what brands need to do is understand all of this stuff and talk to their existing customers, their potential customers, and see where they fit and where they feel about this. And again, go back to my research with Warwick, is if I read all the data, it would be like every business is going to be on TikTok and this is what they're doing. But in the quals that I've done and the data that's coming through, it's like, no, it's not a priority. Other things are a priority. It's going to be really hard to engage with our colleagues to create TikTok content. So there is always this gap between early adopters and what we want to do, and actually the practicalities of day to day. And it'll be a question, you'll get this question, what's next, what's happening next? And you kind of go, LinkedIn's been around since 2003 and we're still trying to crack this one. Can we just do one or two things really well and embed it, rather than trying to add the new things? And again, I think it's that the new stuff happening that is affecting the non-Gen Zs with fear and overwhelm of it being
and this is where the time question comes from. I haven't got time for this. I can't be over Instagram, to Facebook, LinkedIn, this is quite interesting though, actually. You only have to tap into Google TikTok got me fired, right, to really understand what's happening on that platform, and how it brings brand reputation in under the microscope. And this happens every week. You only have to pop that into Google and you can see new stories coming up every week about how TikTok got someone fired. So this is quite an interesting one for me, because employees are using TikTok. But there's no demarcation between, they think, well, I'm using that as myself, and actually my workplace, that's all about LinkedIn and Twitter. What I do on TikTok's got nothing to do with my work. But we have seen over and over again employees getting pulled into the spotlight And that reflects on the brand. I've gone off script again, but I just think that's quite interesting. Have you got any thoughts about that?
I will share two thoughts. One, if anyone ever thinks that blocking people on TikTok stops you being able to see your TikTok, it doesn't. You don't have to be logged in on a desktop to be able to see any TikTok account. So if you think that you have blocked colleagues, brand accounts, don't assume that you can do things privately on social media, because there are ways to get round. So don't think that if you do something privately that your colleagues and etc. won't be able to find it. That can be some reasons. I think it is important for organisations to have social media policies, as part of an employment contract. And I've seen some organisations be really strict around this and some be a bit more flexible. I think it's just employers should have the conversation around do's and don'ts. And this is as much about social media as it is going to business events and networking and how you conduct yourself and what you say and what you don't say. And people do have lives outside work, and I'm not saying don't use social media, but just think, can you get found? Can you get referenced back to the organization? And be cautious, because you earn a living through your salary.
Yeah, I always think, actually, I think organizations have a bit of a responsibility to educate employees around the wider impact of social. I think there's a lot of focus on how to use LinkedIn, how to use employee advocacy, maybe Twitter, but I also think actually there's a responsibility of things like geotagging on your phone, right? And when you're out and about in places and you've just gone and taken the photo of this amazing client meeting you're about to have, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work it out based on your geotag. And what you're giving away to competitors. But also on Facebook, announcing you're off on holiday for 2 weeks, and it's these basic things that I think maybe organizations could take a wider education around, which is you're an employee. It's like you're our responsibility when it comes to your social brand, your professional social brand, but actually just be careful of the wider social implications as well. I don't know. Have you ever seen that done?
Well, there's a couple of things. I think there's the reason that some of this happens in the first place is because it's free, it's easy to download, the phones are in our pocket on our desks all the time, and people don't get training on it. I had training on Word and Excel and PowerPoint and how to use it. Didn't download the app and off you go. That's part of the underlying issue. There's a great cartoon, I'll send it to you, Sarah, that I use at the end of my LinkedIn training that says something like, now you look on LinkedIn, you look professional and credible, but according to your Facebook profile, you're a fan of Jack Daniels and, happy with your body. And so I will always end a LinkedIn training session by going, I've shown you this bit. This is great. Please check everything else. Google yourself. Check your Facebook privacy settings. A wonderful presentation I went to many years ago, probably one of the first conferences I went to, was the speaker that had the after lunch slot, which you never want the after lunch slot, do you, in a venue? But he sat at the back of the room all morning just tapping away, and I thought, it's a bit odd, but he was literally just tapping away. And his presentation after lunch was what he'd found for all the delegates in the room. So he was showing us their houses, he was cross-referencing it with Google search, showing us their kids and where they went to school, and you were just kind of sitting there going, "Please let my privacy settings be okay." But it was so amazing that he could find one thing and then kind of cross-reference it, and just the fact that it is so easy. And again, I've since sat in sessions, and I always tell this story, but I'll look at a Facebook page and a leader may have liked something, and then I'll kind of click on their profile and go, oh, so this is where you live and this is where you go on holiday, and they go, oh, so shall I stop liking things on Facebook? I'm like, no, let's just close your settings down. Let's make sure that we've been through, and ultimately whatever platform you're using, know what you're sharing and who you're sharing it with. And my life isn't exciting, but I don't allow anyone to tag me in images or post on my feed if I'm not friends with them and things like that. And I just think, because when you set up your account, you download it, you just tap things in. No one goes through the privacy settings or
They
checks. And
don't.
as a default, everything's open. So part of the conversation is you can stay in control of this, and you should be in control of it. And then it's up to you how much you post and what you're doing. But yeah, you can close this stuff down. But yeah, Google yourself, Google everyone, and
Yeah.
yeah. It
It
was
just
a
reminded me.
brilliant session.
Yeah, what? How scary! But everyone
Yeah.
was sat there thinking, "Oh
You were
no."
kind of going, no.
I tell you, there's another thing as well. A lot of employees don't do this on purpose. They inadvertently bring brands. Most of the time, it's
not
because they've made a
intentional.
mistake. It's not intentional. But we did some research last year. Actually, 2021. It's on our website. Maybe Ryan can pop it in the thing. But about different generational attitudes to risk, actually, and the two generations that hadn't read or understood the policy were Gen Z and baby boomers. So it was either end. The actual millennial Gen X's, that kind of, they did read it, or whether they understood it's another thing, but at least they knew where it was and were aware of it.
Yeah.
But the other two, something like 57% weren't even aware of any policies, and it was the two either extreme generations. So that in itself, I thought, was a little bit, concerning. So you may have a policy, but nobody understands it or can find it. So,
and I think it's just have conversations around the do's and the don'ts and expectations. And if you going back to the employee advocacy, if you want people to get involved, you can't just have a policy that says don't do anything, or you could lose your job if you post on TikTok. It's about giving them the do's and the examples and empowering them to do it as well. And that's what organizations need to do. Almost like, we'll help you protect yourself, particularly if another question on our research I haven't got the answer was like, I feel concerned about my data and my privacy. And actually, again, coming back to that kind of generational training, if you can kind of reassure around the fears and that, there's a few settings here, let's sort that out, and then off you go and dive in. Again, that's probably the fear that we've had because we've heard stories, whereas perhaps the younger generations learn by error or something happening rather than having that air of caution.
Learning through mistakes is fine, but it can be pretty, bad if it hits the wires and suddenly becomes viral. And so do you think older generations lean to more social platforms than others? Do you think, is there a difference, do you think?
The data shows that there is a difference. I'm not sure the data that I've seen is always about user. The questions always seem to be, this is people's favorite platform. And I'm always a bit, what do you mean by favorite? Because I could ask you the question and say, for communicating with your friends and family, what's your favorite, versus for doing business, what's your favorite? So it's a bit broad. But the data that I have seen that says what's your favorite social media platforms will say Facebook for an older generation, and perhaps because they've been there for so long that they're not going to leave. And again, it comes back to that adding new ones in all the time. So I think, yes, the data will say Facebook. There will be skews in there as well on LinkedIn, maybe around when it started and people's where they were in the workplace as well. And I think it's just, the new entrance is the challenge. So we'll just find them on the more established where they've always been. Whether they're using it so much as they did, there's always like, what I want is the data of how often do they log in and what do they use and how big are their networks and the values. But I think I would be looking at, where do I get the best results or what's most relevant to me? And that's the one that I've got to use. But also, it's important to recognize that people do use more than one platform.
Yes.
And for different reasons. And I think the data, I did it in a presentation yesterday, I can't remember the second figure, it's 7 point something is how many platforms people are using on a monthly basis. That will include what WhatsApp is in there, Facebook Messenger is in there, but we can't just say, yes, Gen Gen X are using Facebook, Gen Z are using this. And
No.
there's an amazing chart. Again, I used it in something. I think I'll send it to you if you haven't got it, around times of day as well, and how but it used to be, you would do it as like, I get up in the morning and I listen to the radio, and then I read the newspaper, and then I go to work, and then I come home and watch the news. But there's this great pattern around social media, and actually for Gen Z, Instagram is top for like most hours on the day, and then at 11 o'clock at night, TikTok and YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, so there's almost like this mixture of how there's more than one platform, but also at different times of day.
Different
TikTok 11 o'clock at night is what the Gen Zs are up to.
Yeah, well, I'm well in bed by then. Sorry, Gen X. That's fascinating. Can you send me that, actually?
I will do. Really
I was also curious, when's your research? You've referenced that a few times. When's it supposed to be launching, or is it for the public eye? Or?
No, absolutely will be. So we first started it in end of March 2020. But actually, in hindsight, we have a brilliant benchmark snapshot of the world as it was kind of closing down, and we've just repeated it. So I think we've literally closed the data collection 30th of November, so like 5 days ago. So I think we'll be talking about it kind of February next year.
Yeah,
fab. Really there.
Well, do let us know, because I'd be quite interested in that. We talked a bit about YouTube, and I found that thing actually about it. There you go. Speaking of TikTok and YouTube, a final piece of guidance for Gen Z and millennials alike: video content is king. More than half of Gen Z uses YouTube daily. That's in that Trust Radius survey. So that was quite good. Tell us about that. What about, are there any generational differences with the way YouTube's being used? I mean, I know Generation Z and millennials are big video consumers.
I had a look at this data, because I'm not actually a big YouTube watcher. I've never been a big video content watcher. I've got a stack of books here. I'm a reader, and I download the white papers and the industry analyst reports. I'm not a big YouTuber, even though I know a lot of people are. But I looked at the data, and it said the kind of the peaks, the biggest, most used was the 25 to 34 group. So that's kind of millennials more, and then the 35 to 44. So actually it was slightly older than perhaps I would have expected it to be. There's a whole different conversation about age you can start using social media that wouldn't appear in the data, and also slightly more male. But for me, it comes back to, again, the data has always shown Facebook is the most used social media platform, and then YouTube. And I think it comes back to it being a search tool. I know, most people will use it for how-to instructions, won't they? How to do something, or engaging, and gamers are using it. I think what's interesting about YouTube is how over the past couple of years they have made lots of changes to the platform. And do we again pick up on the kind of the TikTok trend of short form video content with YouTube Shorts, and how they're kind of competing in that same space of TikTok's Reels, YouTube Shorts? And for me, that's a content question, but I think there's a shift in YouTube from being any video and long form to actually now it does sit within that group of social.
So do you think that's quite interesting? So that's quite an interesting insight you got there. So a couple of questions that are coming to my head. So they have probably a wider demographic on YouTube than TikTok does. So they could have appealed to a much bigger audience if they shifted. Because I do often wonder with TikTok, is it a functionality, or is it really a social network? Is it the fact that it is the quirky algorithm that the Gen Z likes, that, in the short form video, the fun, the entertainment platform side of it? If YouTube made a few tweaks, could they do? I'm thinking Clubhouse, right? Clubhouse came, and I don't go on there at all anymore. But that was a functionality that now is embedded into Twitter, into LinkedIn, rolling out. So that was a functionality. So what you're saying, that maybe YouTube might be integrating some of that TikTok functionality in to take them on?
Yeah, and I think talk about Clubhouse, which is audio, and TikTok. not saying they wouldn't be where they are now, but when we went into lockdown, our lives changed completely. And, you know, there were people on furlough and, you know, lockdown at home and, you know, children off from school and looking for entertainment in a different way. And so I think that accelerated TikTok. And I also believe that Clubhouse was accelerated because it was talked about a lot at the beginning of 2021, where again we went into the big lockdown and schools home, and people were getting fed up of being on screen, weren't they? And watching themselves and going, do you know what? I want to listen, but I'm done with my camera. So I think, but that's always important, that, you know, how we communicate is part of the world around us and what's happening. But I do think that we know that the social media platforms are always copying each other's features as well. You know, TikTok have now got TikTok Now, which is a Be Real feature and things. So I just think that while I haven't always been a big follower of YouTube, that they are shifting into having some similar features. So it's kind of an area to explore.
Yeah, but what I find fascinating about that is they have an established audience and a wider demographic audience, don't they? Which actually bringing that functionality to that audience, that just sort of widens the scope and makes you think that that's perhaps a serious platform for social. It already
and advertising,
is
paid, as well.
No, that's fascinating. Wow, you are full of information.
Well, a question: are you a consumer of video and YouTube content?
Not so much, but my kids are. They are, you know, YouTube kids, they will sit and watch the same YouTube video over and over again. And I'll be sat down and I'll just be, I'm sure we've watched this. I have to say, some of the, I am slightly addicted to the, you know, how they make cakes look like objects, and you know, there are funny and craft things and 5-minute crafts, and I do watch all of that with my kids on YouTube. But generally, no, I don't consume content on YouTube. I really don't, and I don't see it as that sort of platform.
But is that a media shift? Do they watch TV?
No, not well. They do, but not as much as YouTube. No. They'd much rather scroll through mini vids on YouTube. And then I see them repeating what they've watched on there. So I'll come out and see some cakes that were like, well, how did you get the inspiration for that? Or they've made something, you know. And in fact, that's quite nice, actually, because they're using it as an education platform. And then they're you know, copying what they see and then bringing it to life. It's quite cool, really. But I don't consume it like that. So
no, I don't either. But it's about, that's why it's so important for us to not just be confined by what we do. Isn't it? You know, you never can as a marketer. You know, you're not the only person. It's about trying to explore how other people are using platforms and their preferences and their likes for it as well.
So what's your well, a couple of questions there then, actually. I was going to say, what would be a key takeaway for folks listening, watching, recorded version of this? What would be your takeaway? But then I'm going to ask you one that's not on here, which is like predictions for next year, like how social. I mean, so I love the updates that you do. You know, you do them with different people, but you are on top of all the changes and what's happening and stuff like that. So I'd love to get your perspective of what's happening next year. So a key takeaway for folks to take, and then what you think is going to happen next year and beyond.
Okay, so I think the title of this is, you know, why social media is not just for Gen Z. It is not just for Gen Z. It is a comms channel. And dare I say it, Sarah, because again, I did a presentation earlier in this week. Gen Alpha will turn into teenagers next year, which is the age that they can officially join social media platforms.
Wow. Gen Alpha.
So I'll just park that of, you know, we have to start thinking that you can join social media at the age of 13. That's a whole nother topic. The online safety bill's coming out next year and, you know, things around that. But yes, our Gen Alpha are turning into teenagers next year. So in a year's time, so we could be having this, you know, what a Gen Alpha up to, or maybe 5 years time when they turn 18. So I think it is for all generations, but every generation will have different life experiences, different understanding and familiarity with tech. And I think it's about separating social from life and technology and fears and how we live. Trends. I can do this because I did a LinkedIn Live earlier and prepped on trends. And yeah, as you said, you know, with the Lighthouse, and I'm watching the trends every day, and it's probably changed throughout the hour that we've done this, particularly the states are just waking up, aren't they? So, you know, Mr. Musk may have just tweeted something that's changed everything, but we'll see. I think the trends are around this using social as search.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of focus from the platforms this year in terms of features and support for creators, what we were saying earlier about kind of collaborators and potentially ways that they can be supported financially and start to monetize as well. But I think one of the biggest trends and what we're seeing, and again, this is supported by TikTok and its popularity of the For You page, where you're served content that is from people you're not necessarily following, is that other platforms are introducing that as well. Particularly Meta and Facebook have kind of said, you know, you will be served more in your newsfeed that is not necessarily from the people you follow. So there's lots of angles to that, from like, it's going to be harder to get your audience of followers to see your content. There's a different mindset to social is about discovery and how can you create content that people can discover and work their way through the marketing funnel. But also, I'm quite liking the fact that I'm going to be served more content from people outside of my bubble, from the people that perhaps we're in our worlds and we know who's in our world, and we know that there's filter bubbles and I can't, you know, the numbers around it, that actually to be served more content from a more global point of view, from a more diverse point of view, to open my mind up to, oh, you haven't seen this, but we think you would like it. I like that.
That's wow. So that's quite interesting then.
So I think there's the shifts, there's changes, ups and downs. I think the thing about predictions is this changes all the time, and we just we need to have one foot in the future and one foot in the day. What we need to do now, and just make sure that we stay focused, I think, is probably the hardest thing.
Yeah, because I think sometimes we can jump too far forward and actually forget where we are today and what people are needing. But they're really three big trends, so that's good. Thank you, Luann. I could natter
on. We could sit here all day.
I know we could, and this is what happens when we have these phone calls, isn't it? It's like, and I almost forgot then that we were actually on a LinkedIn Live just chatting away.
Watching?
Yeah. But it's great, and thank you for bringing all your insights and those trends that you've just discussed, but also the stats and some of your own research. I really appreciate that. Thank you. But what a great conversation, eh? I'm feeling a piece of content bubbling up on this. I was going to say a blog, but that's just so Gen X, isn't it?
we need to do. Yeah. What do we do?
Yeah.
We'll stick to our generation. We can't change our generation, can we?
No, we can't. No, can't change who we are. But thank you so much, Luann. And for anybody who's watching, this is the last one. And we're not doing any more now until after Christmas. So we'll be back in January. But so wishing you all the best. And thank you once again, Luann. And I really appreciate it. It's really good. Cheers.
Good to chat.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye.